thank you all for coming to this track, the organizational design track. The content in this track is intended to examine the ways in which organizations are set up affect how we're able to leverage design, leverage innovative ideas, execute on those, and how changing the way organizations are set up allow us to better make use of design. So my name is Adam Connor. I am the VP of Organizational Design for Matt Powell. I work with organizations to help them understand what their challenges are to being more creative, being more collaborative, and then identify changes that they can make to the way they are set up, the way they work with one another to help them be more creative and more collaborative. So I want to start us off here with a talk that I am calling Redesigning the Table. How many people in this room are designers? Fair amount. How many of you who are not designers really like design? Fair amount. Great. So for a long time, for as long as I've been a designer, which is about 15 years now, there have been these constant arguments and pleas that designers need a seat at the table. Designers want to be more of a part of an organization so they can have more of an impact, more strategic effect. And to that, where we are today, I'd like to say congratulations. We're there. We're at a point right now where there has never been as much attention and as much desire for design talent ever. Right now we're seeing things like this report from Design Management Institute that found that design-led organizations drastically outperformed the S&P over the past 10 years. CNN released a report. Demand for the job of UX designer in the US is expected to increase by 22% in the next 10 years. And anecdotally, from Matt Powell's perspective, the people that we talk to, the people that hire us and bring them in to work on projects, we've seen a drastic increase in titles like CCO, Chief Creative Officer, CDO, Chief Design Officer, Chief Experience Officer, and other leadership roles. And this is awesome. We've made it. But then we see things like Windows 7. The Amazon phone. They couldn't give this away. At one point they were selling it for about $1. Who can forget Netflix Quickster? Did everybody forget it? It lasted about a day. All of these organizations, Microsoft, Amazon, Netflix, they have tremendous design talent. I know designers at these organizations. They are far smarter and more clever than I will ever be. And so what I've seen working with organizations is that having design talent does not ensure design success. Things can still go wrong. And everybody makes a mistake. Every organization is going to have a flop, or two, or three. But some have far more than that. So we need to look at why this is happening. Leah Bewley, in a recent report after making her transition to Forrester, Leah was a UX designer and is now an analyst with Forrester, did a survey. And she asked designers from all places, all manner of roles, VP, C-level, individual designers, solo, part of a team. She asked them, what kinds of things are getting in your way? What kinds of things are affecting the impact that design has on your organization? And of the responses she got back were things like partial implementation, lack of understanding, lack of leadership, resource constraints, silos and politics. And we're all pretty familiar with these kinds of things. Okay? We've all faced these kinds of things. What I've noticed in the organizations that I work with the ones that struggle to come up with good ideas or execute on those good ideas, is not that it's a lack of talent or problems with technology or even a lack of ideas. The things that get in the way are people problems. They're challenges with the way that people interact with one another within the organization, kinds of conversations they have, the way they exchange ideas. There's this law from a man named Melvin Conway. He's a computer scientist. He was an early computer scientist. And he observed in the teams that he worked with, the organizations that he saw, that the products, the things they came up with, the things they were creating, were a direct reflection of the way teams worked and talked to one another inside the organization. So if one team over here was coding a certain module and another team over here was working on a certain module, and those two modules needed to talk to one another, the way they would talk to one another was a direct reflection of the way the two teams actually talked to one another. And I've seen something similar in design. An organization needs to be able to take advantage of the design talent that they have. And in order to do that, they need to have a culture that supports that design talent, that makes designers and other people with innovative ideas, clever ideas, it gives them a platform, a vehicle to move those ideas through the company. So let's think about these barriers. Where do these barriers come from? These are all manifestations of an organization's culture. A culture is the shared beliefs and behaviors of a group. Right? The way we all act and talk with one another. That's what comprises our culture. So when we look at these and we think about, okay, what's my organization's culture? Where can I see that in play? We think about things like skills and knowledge that people have, the tools and processes that an organization has, the structure in which they're set up, their hierarchy, the roles that people hold, the way they talk to one another, the policies they put in place, and their values and beliefs. These are all the areas in which cultural pieces manifest. And if we want to try to change these things, if we want to try to make them better so that design can have more of an impact, so that we can actually use all that talent and use it to great effect, then we run into challenges. Just changing culture is insanely hard. It's really, truly difficult to change these things because it's this reinforcing system. I take these things and we look at one of them individually, like skills and knowledge. The skills and knowledge that people in an organization have directly reflects the other aspects of culture. Tools and processes, structure and roles, communication, policies, values and beliefs. But all those things also directly influence everybody's skills and knowledge. So when we try to change something, like we try to change a process, it's not as simple as just changing a process, because as soon as you change that process, every other aspect of the culture is pushing back to try to say, no, the process we had is the one that we're optimized for, it's the one we reinforce. This works for every single aspect. Culture is a self-reinforcing system. Every aspect of culture reflects that culture and reinforces that culture in the other aspects. And so we end up with a really scary pattern. It's really hard to pick through. Where do we make change? How do we do this? And so we see organizations try to make changes. We see organizations say, oh, waterfall doesn't work, so we're going to go agile. And they try to bring in this process. And they train a few people. And then those people train a few more. And more often than not, that that doesn't hold because the other aspects of culture aren't changing to support that process. I have seen at this point hundreds of millions of dollars spent by organizations to try to change some aspect of culture, like process, flush down the toilet, because they tried to change just one aspect of their culture. Sometimes they didn't even know they were changing culture, they just hyper-focused on process. You just need to change the process without a realization that there's everything else in the organization working against you. And so if we're going to try to change culture, we need to be really intentional about it. We need to focus our efforts and understand exactly what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. And this is why changing culture can be seen as a design challenge. We can start by working to understand the culture that we currently have. What are those shared behaviors and beliefs? Where are there gaps in those? Where are there differences in those? And we can envision a future. What's the culture that we want to have? How do we want people to work together? What do we want people to believe about each other and believe in what we're trying to do? And we have tools that help us do these things, right? This is the culture map. This is from Dave Gray. Very smart man who's been working on this problem a lot. He uses this with his clients to help them understand what their beliefs are and how those beliefs manifest in behavior. But we have other tools that we're also really familiar with that we use in other types of design projects. We have journey maps, right? If we're looking at this as a design problem, as an experience design problem, we can talk with employees and we can understand their experiences as they try to work with others, as they go through certain processes. We can talk to them about what their beliefs are, what their perceptions are of the others that they're trying to work with. And we can map those. And we have other tools from other facets of design. We have the COM-B model from behavior change. This is a great model that helps us understand what makes a behavior likely to take place. So if I have a capability and an opportunity and a motivation to do something, it's much more likely that that behavior will take place. But if I'm missing one of those, if I'm missing an opportunity or motivation, it's not so likely. It might be impossible for that behavior to take place. And we can see this in effect, is we can look at our skills and tools and knowledge, and those amount to our capabilities. Processes, policies, communication, our opportunities. And values, beliefs, and the structures and roles that reinforce those values and beliefs are our motivation. So let's think about an example here. Who here is familiar with swoop and poop? Right? Swoop and poop is this behavior where you are working on a project, you've gotten pretty far, you get to a meeting with an executive who has to approve your work, they're seeing it for the first time, and they just shit all over everything you did. And you have to go back to the drawing board. And why does this happen? Because it happens so freaking frequently. Well, think about it. That executive, that person who's in that role, they have this motivation of needing to make sure that their view is heard. They need to get their perspective out. They are responsible for this thing that you are going to launch. Right? And so they have a motivation. They know what they think. They have their own idea, their own vision. So they have a capability to be able to talk about that. And now, you just showed them what you have. And you asked for their feedback. You've just handed them the opportunity. And so that behavior, that swoop and poop, is gonna happen. And so we can use tools that we already have in design and other facets of design to help us understand why things are happening in our own organizations. And we can use this to envision the future culture that we want. And then we carry on like any other design project. We identify the opportunities and the gaps to get us from one to the other. Where do we need to focus our efforts? We can generate ideas. What kinds of changes do we want to make? What kinds of changes to process might we want to make? What kinds of changes to communication? What new tools? right? And if we're doing this holistically and we realize that whole web of culture, we can be sensitive to how things are going to affect each other. And so then we prioritize and we can start to select, well, let's try these things first. And you take baby steps. And you analyze how that go. Right? You critique. Did that give us the effect we wanted? How about our implementation? Is that really how we wanted to do these things? And we iterate, and we keep going. We don't stop. This isn't just a one change to get everything we want. So where do we start? If this web is really complicated and all these things reinforce each other, what's the best place to start? We got to start somewhere. What I found working with teams is that the best place is often with values and beliefs. If you talk to people about what their beliefs are and what their values are and the work they're trying to do, and you ask them about their perceptions and their beliefs of the others that they are trying to work with, you can surface some really interesting insights. I worked with a team of people who were working to improve the wellness of their customers. And we had a big workshop. This was a new view, new perspective for the team. And so we held a workshop, and it comprised of UX designers, product managers, marketers, service staff, all across the company. The workshop was called by the UX team, and so I did most of my coordination with them. And very early on in those conversations, I heard things like, well, we don't think the product managers are going to be into this. And they have a very different set of priorities. They don't want to do these kinds of things. They don't really care about the customers the way we care about the customers. That was the overwhelming sense that they had. And so part of that workshop, we did some exercises where we had each group talk about what their beliefs are, what their perspectives were of each other. And in the conversation with the product managers, it came to light that they really do care, and they are just as frustrated at the fact that their own organization is reinforcing things that they shouldn't care about, that is forcing them to prioritize things that they know they shouldn't. And immediately we saw a change in the way these two groups worked together, because we were able to expose shared beliefs. And they had new challenges now that they could address together. And so by starting at the belief level, you can understand where you have common shared values. And you can work to address those first. Because just like when we're designing new products and services, we need users to see value in that product and service in order to get them to use it. If we're going to change culture, we need people that we're changing the culture for to see value in that change, to want to be a part of it. So intentional culture change requires us to be persistent. This is not just bringing in a trainer and saying, oh, you all know Agile now and everything's better. Or, oh, you've all learned how to facilitate meetings now, everything's better. That's not how this works. We need to be persistent. We need to keep going. We need to keep taking stock of where we're at and how close we're getting to the culture we want to have. And so we really need to make sure that we are effectively identifying the future we want, the culture we want, the characteristics, the beliefs that we hold, and take an active stance in making sure that culture happens. So intentional culture change is design. That's why intentional culture change is organizational design. It is actively looking at the constructs of an organization and changing them so that that organization can reach the goals it has. That's where I'll leave you. Yeah, so I think you can have organizations within organizations, right? You can change, even just in a company, you're going to have teams, and you can try to change the culture of the team. So I think depending on where you sit and what culture you're trying to achieve, and where things are impeding upon that culture, directs where you have to make change, right? So sometimes it's between two organizations working together, right? And so that's where you want to address your changes. That's where you want to focus them. So it's about understanding kind of where the pain points are. If this is the culture we want, what are the things that are getting in the way of that? Where are those interactions happening where shit's hitting the fan, right? And then addressing those things. I also think it's very important to realize that this is hard, and it can often be seen that, okay, well, I can't do anything about this because I sit so far down and I can't really affect anything. This is something for like leaders and the executives to think about, but that's not true. No matter where you sit in an organization, you have an opportunity to change the culture around you, right? Sometimes it's just as easy as asking questions. What is it that you're trying to achieve, right? Ask people what their goals are, what their beliefs are about what they're asking you to do. Talk to them about what you think they're asking you to do. Ask them to relate things back. I had a conversation yesterday about organizations that espouse certain values. Like, we really believe in patient wellness. But then their behaviors all reflect that, no, they don't really care about patient wellness. They care more about the money coming in. Right? And you can ask questions about that. So no matter where you sit, you have opportunities. You can be a model for change.